Iran is not willing to give up its nuclear ambitions. Are we getting closer to an explosion in the Middle East? In Israel, we are preparing for fire from Iran. US forces have begun preparations for clearing mines in the Strait of Hormuz. Trump declared the imposition of naval blockade in Hormuz and stated that the Iranians, they lied. And alongside the blockade in the Strait of Hormuz, the United States is considering the possibility of returning to strikes in Iran. After the fateful declaration today by the President of the United States, Donald Trump, Iran is threatening that no port in the Gulf will be safe. And while the ceasefire is in place, it is being revealed that Iran is using old components and producing new ballistic missiles. And right now, our Hezbollah in Iran on the verge of an explosion against Israel, while the IDF prepares with full force for multi-front escalation. Will the United States also be hurt economically by the naval blockade in Hormuz? And is the United States going to impose 50% tariffs on China if it supplies Iran with missiles? And right now, Russia is offering to take Iran's enriched uranium. And the blockade on Iran, a surge in global energy prices is seen. And meanwhile, in Iran, the question is being asked why, contrary to what is required by the Muslim religion, Ali Khamenei has still not been brought to burial. I'm Yair Pinto, and with me is Mati Shoshani, and we are boots on the ground. We bring you the whole truth about what's happening in Israel, and also the whole truth about what's happening in our neighborhood, the Middle East. And this is the opening of day 45 of the war, Roaring Lion, or by its American name, Epic Fury. The United States is aiming at Tehran's wallet. Trump's war strategy shows that he intends to break Iran by using the last card left in its hand. After the failure of the peace talks, the President of the United States ordered the American Navy to block all the ports of the Islamic Republic and stop every vessel that paid passage fees to Tehran. Look, the naval blockade declared by President Trump is a huge and complex military operation. Starting today at 10 a.m. Washington time, the American Navy has become the traffic police of the busiest energy route in the world. This military operation is meant to neutralize Iran's economic capabilities and prevent it from collecting protection money from foreign ships. And it seems that the rules of the engagement from the American side are open. So it seems that here in Israel, there is preparation for the possibility of the war returning, and also for a surprise Iranian attack against us. So is escalation at the door? Dozens of American aircrafts were suddenly seen in the area. Many American refueling and transport aircrafts crossed Europe in recent nights on their way to the Middle East. But to the Americans' credit, as soon as the round of fighting ended, Trump made it clear that the United States military and their assets would remain in the area. And more than that, it now appears that additional American military forces are arriving to reinforce the Middle East. The spokesman for the central headquarters of Iran's army declared that enemy ships will not be allowed to pass through the Strait of Hormuz, and that Tehran will enforce permanent control over the strait even after the end of this war. The commander of the Iranian Navy added that the American threat is ridiculous. The head of the Joint Command Headquarters of the Iranian forces, Qatam al-Anabiya, attacked the blockade declared by the United States. President Donald Trump in the Strait of Hormuz saying that it's illegal and it constitutes piracy. This is what the Iranians are saying to Trump. He also said that Iran will implement a permanent mechanism for control over Hormuz because of the threats. The commander of the Iranian Navy responded to Trump's threats and said that they are very ridiculous and very funny, and they are ready to crush the American enemy. The commander of Iran's Navy, Shahram Irani, said that the threats of the President of the United States, Donald Trump, regarding the blockade on the Strait of Hormuz are ridiculous, and that after the humiliating defeat of the United States in the war, Iran won, and added that the Americans are very ridiculous and very funny. He further added, the men of Iran's Navy are tracking and monitoring all movements of the American military in the region. I only want to ask, what reality is he living in? And has he seen the difference in the sizes between the Iranian toys sailing at the sea and the American warships? Write in the comments what you think. But the Revolutionary Guard said that the approach of the military vessels to the Strait of Hormuz is considered a violation of the ceasefire. They added that the Strait of Hormuz is under control, open for innocent passages of civilian vessels, and that military vessels intending to approach the Strait of Hormuz under any pretext will be considered violations of the ceasefire and will be dealt with severely. Look, it's important to remember that according to the assessments, within 13 days, the naval blockade could collapse Iran economically. Economic analysis reveals the severe damage that will be caused to Iran as a result of the American blockade. This means hundreds of millions of dollars a day, shortages of basic produce, while the Revolutionary Guards continue to produce weapons and other components that were manufactured even before this war. The IDF is closely monitoring the Iranian industry and preparing for every scenario, including the collapse of the ceasefire and a renewal of the fighting. So how did we get from the Islamabad summit to a naval blockade? Today, we will dive into the failure of the negotiations and the intensifying American pressure on Iran. Look, despite the heavy damage to the Iranian Navy, the Revolutionary Guards have a navy of their own, adapted for focused attacks in the Strait. So they're maintaining dozens of fast attack boats that continue to disrupt movement in the Strait of Hormuz and, of course, push oil prices above $100 per barrel. I know, it sounds as if the Revolutionary Guards in Iran are completely crazy and do not understand who they're fighting. In Israel, they're trying to understand what's happening on the Iranian side and why they are so blind to the reality. One of the unusual assessments that was raised in recent days is that within the Iranian leadership itself, there is a very distorted picture of reality. According to that assessment, elements from the Revolutionary Guards are pressing Mustafa Khamenei and closed circles at the top with falsified descriptions of this war, videos, simulations, and images meant to present a reality according to which Israel was destroyed, the United States was beaten, and Iran actually won. In Israel, they believe that the goal is to keep the decision makers on a hard line and prevent them from being exposed to the real situation on the ground. This is something that happens all the time in corrupt and dark regimes. And on top of all of this, the crisis in the rule of the Revolutionary Guards in Tehran can be seen worsening. More than 40 days have passed since the supreme leader Ali Khamenei was eliminated in a strike in Tehran, but his body has not yet been brought to burial, because his son and heir, Mustafa Khamenei, is heading a mafia regime that fears public reaction and undermining of internal stability. The unusual delay in the burial is contrary to the Muslim religion and is seen by experts as a clear sign of the deep fear gripping the top of the regime. All the details coming up real soon in this report. And I have to say that it seems that the President of the United States, Donald Trump, has often referred in recent days, since the ceasefire was decided on, to what's happening in Iran after a month of intensive strikes all across the country. And it seems that he's doing everything in his power to bring the situation to an end through diplomatic agreement. And right now, it appears that the Revolutionary Guards in Iran have made their decision. Prime Minister Netanyahu spoke with J.D. Vance, and from his words, it appears that the United States is not demanding a permanent Iranian reinforcement or renunciation of enrichment. They are demanding that there will be no uranium enrichment in Iran for decades now. And right now in Pakistan, they are claiming a new round of talks between the United States and Iran coming soon. ... In addition, the American president is intensifying his harsh criticism towards NATO alliance and their countries following the failure to support Operation Night Fury against Iran, and hinted that America's financial commitment to the alliance will come under very serious review. And in addition to everything, China is currently moving to the center of the picture. And this is following the naval blockade. China is the country most harmed by the war and the American blockade of the strait. And the question is being asked whether it will be pushed towards an agreement or would like to see the United States actually get entangled in a war with Iran. Saudi Arabia will reduce oil shipments to China in the month of May to only about 20 million barrels. This is compared to about 40 million barrels that are sent in April. So this sharp decline stems from the severe disruptions in the supply chain following the crisis in the Strait of Hormuz. And this is going to choke Chinese production. All the details coming up. And ahead of the opening of the negotiations between Israel and Lebanon in Washington, the IDF launched a move to capture the symbol of the Hezbollah terrorist organization in the south of the country. This is in order to weaken the terrorist organization and not to give it the power to threaten during the negotiations. IDF forces this morning began a ground entry into the town of Binchbel after an encirclement that lasted several days. The place is considered a symbol of Hezbollah, and famous speeches by Nasrallah were delivered there before he was eliminated. In the army, they estimated that dozens of terrorists are surrounded inside the area and resistance is expected. 5 IDF divisions are deepening their operations in Lebanon and are based on the anti-tank line deep in the territory. How is the IDF operating in Binchbel? Fighter jets and UAVs are circling deep in the area above the ground forces, and the forces are moving slowly and carefully and pushing the terrorists backward. They are forcing them to leave their hiding places and expose themselves to airstrikes. This is where they are quickly eliminated. And in the past week, Division 98 forces completed the encirclement and began the assault on the town of Binchbel in southern Lebanon. During the operation, the forces eliminated more than 100 Hezbollah terrorists in face-to-face combats and from the air, destroyed dozens of terror infrastructure, and located hundreds of weapons. So this is according to the IDF spokesperson's unit. I'm calling on all of you to prepare yourself because today we will bring you all the information about the last stronghold of the Hezbollah terrorist organization. Against the background of America's intention to block maritime traffic in the Strait of Hormuz by itself, Britain's most failed prime minister in history, Keir Starmer, who came under harsh criticism from President Donald Trump during the war, he said that Britain will not be dragged into the Iran war, no matter how much pressure is put on us. Starmer added, "It is vital that the strait be fully opened, and that is where we are investing all of our efforts." I don't think that there is much to say about the Prime Minister of Britain, except to send a lot of love and support to our viewers in Britain, and to tell them that we are praying for all of them. And I'm Yair Pinto, and we are boots on the ground. We bring you the whole truth about what's happening in Israel. And this is day 45 of the war against the Revolutionary Guards in Iran, which is the head of the crumbling axis of evil in the Middle East. And just 1 second before we begin, I want to call on you to keep spreading the truth. Share our content with as many people as possible. Click on the subscribe button. Most importantly, do not forget to look for me, Yair Pinto, and for Mati Shoshani on our social media platforms to get our eye-level view behind the scenes of what it's like to live in Israel in this conflict. Now, as you know, missiles, drones, sirens are being heard, especially in the northern part of Israel, still. And people are still running to bomb shelter despite the ceasefire. And when those missiles started falling, the first people heading out into the streets were volunteers of Magen David Adom, Israel's first responders. You can see their ambulances everywhere in the areas of impact on the screen right next to me. So while families were hiding, Magen David Adom medics were already moving towards the impact sites, treating the wounded, stopping the bleeding, evacuating the injured, saving lives. That's what they do every single time, no hesitation, but responding to a war like this takes more than courage. It takes ambulances, protective gear, trauma equipment, and trained teams ready to move within seconds. And that readiness depends on support. So if you want to stand with the people who run towards danger to save others, you can go to savelifeisrael.com. You can help make sure that Magen David Adom stays equipped, prepared, and ready, because when the next siren sounds, they are already underway to save lives. So make your donations at savelifeisrael.com and stand with those that save lives here in Israel. Guys, the clock is ticking towards 5 p.m. And this time, it's not just another theoretical threat. The United States is preparing to begin maritime enforcement against Iran, and Iran has already fired back with a counter threat. If ports are not safe, then Gulf ports will not be safe either. And at the same time, Israel is raising its alert level, not because there is certainty of an attack, but because in the Middle East, even a small miscalculation can turn within minutes into a night of missile fire. The question now is very simple. Are we standing at the edge of an economic chokehold that could break Tehran, or just before the opening shot of a new round of war? That's the heart of Day 45 of the Roaring Lion War, or by its American name, Epic Fury. This is not just another day. This is not just routine waiting, and not just another chapter in the fragile ceasefire. This is a day when military force, economic pressure, and failed diplomacy all converge on one narrow point on the map, the Strait of Hormuz. That passage, physically narrow but globally massive in importance, has in recent days gone from Iran's main leverage point to America's test case. And this is not only about oil, it is about control, about deterrence, and about who really sets the rules at sea. After 21 hours of direct talks in Pakistan, there was no deal. The Americans left without an agreement. The Iranians left without relief. And everyone left with greater suspicion. The main point of dispute remained exactly the same: the nuclear issue. Washington demanded a clear commitment that Iran would not keep the ability to move towards a nuclear weapon. Tehran refused to give up enrichment on Iranian soil. Around that, more disputes piled up: reopening Hormuz, the fate of the enriched uranium, the question of frozen funds, and whether there is a minimum level of trust on which anything can be built. But after the talks collapsed, the picture became clearer. Trump chose not to move immediately to a broad military strike, but to another track: maritime coercion. In simple terms, instead of trying to break Iran only through bombings, he's trying to squeeze it through the sea, to allow ships to pass to non-Iranian ports, but to block entry and exit from the Iranian ports themselves. Not to officially declare all-out war, but to create a situation in which the Iranian economy begins to choke day after day. From here, we also need to understand the operational logic of this move. To enforce a blockade like this, a tweet is not enough, and a speech is also not enough. You need a line of interception. You need identification. You need questioning. You need bordering operations. You need maritime, aerial, and satellite intelligence. You need to know where every vessel is headed, where it came from, where it paid a fee or not, who it paid it to, and what it is carrying. In other words, the American Navy is not becoming only a fighting force, it's becoming the traffic police of one of the most important energy corridors of the world. And here comes one of the most important details of this day. The American goal is not to prevent Iran from exporting oil. The goal is to break the maritime extortion model that Iran built around Hormuz. For weeks, according to the assessments, Tehran tried to profit not only from the threat to the shipping lanes, but also from unofficial transit payments, so-called passage fees, and direct pressure on commercial vessels. Now, the Americans are saying that is over. Anyone who paid Iran may now find himself without safe passage. Anyone who tries to get around it may be detained. Anyone who thinks that he can be an ally of the United States while also cutting a side deal with the Revolutionary Guards is receiving the opposite message today. And that's exactly what stood behind Trump's post yesterday. Not only a message to Tehran, but a much broader one, a message to the states that bought time, bought quiet, and bought passage. a message to every player who tried to profit from the chaos, a message saying the era of side deals is over. If you paid the Revolutionary Guards so you could keep making money, do not expect American protection now, as if nothing happened. In that sense, Hormuz has become more than a maritime passage. It has become a loyalty test. But in Iran, as in Iran, the threat came back almost immediately. The spokesman of Qatam el Anibaya made clear that the role from their side is either everyone or no one. In other words, if Iran's ports are threatened, then the port cities of the Persian Gulf and the Sea of Oman may also enter the equation. This is not just a slogan. It is a declaration that widens the risk. Suddenly, this is not only about American ships or Iranian tankers, but also civilian ports, oil pipelines, unloading terminals, and every state sitting along the Gulf thinking that it can stay on the sidelines. That is also where the Israeli concern comes in. The IDF assesses that the Iranians may choose a response as early as this evening, perhaps against the American bases in the Gulf, perhaps against Gulf targets, and perhaps also against Israel. At the moment, there is no closed intelligence indication of an imminent launch, but there is a working assumption that such a move is possible. And that is why the system is not waiting to see if it happens. It is updating its target bank, sharpening its orders, placing platforms on alert, and working around the clock. This also explains why Israel has made unusual decisions around national ceremonies. The torchlighting ceremony was already filmed in advance, not for convenience, but because of concern over gathering all of Israel's top leadership in one place while Iran still holds some launch capabilities. It is a small detail on the surface, but it tells the whole story. Ceasefire or not, Israel is not living as if this campaign is over. Israel is living as if it could restart with very little warning. And when you examine the Iranian power picture, you see that the regime is trying to project control, but beneath the surface, there are deep signs of erosion. One of the most unusual signs is the story surrounding the burial of Ali Khamenei. More than 40 days have passed since he was eliminated, and still, no official burial ceremony has taken place. In a religious regime that sees rapid burial as basic, that's highly unusual. The explanation now emerging is not technical. It is political and also security related. Fear. Fear of a mass gathering. Fear of demonstrations. Fear of the moment when the funeral turns into an event exposing just how much ground is shaken beneath the regime's feet. And the heir, Mujtaba Khamenei, he has barely been seen. According to the assessments, he was also wounded and is running matters remotely. Some of them reportedly even through only audio calls. This no longer looks like a stable religious leadership. It looks like a survival coalition of revolutionary guards, intelligence bodies, and security arms, each one holding onto what remains. When a regime does not even dare bury its leader in public, that is not just a delay. That is a status report. And that connects directly to the economic war that is now beginning. If the maritime blockade is enforced the way that Washington plans, the damage to Iran could come fast. More than 90% of its maritime trade passes through the Gulf. Oil exports, petrochemical exports, a large share of imports, everything depends on that axis. According to the estimates that are presented to us today, Iran could lose hundreds of millions of dollars every single day. Exports, around 1.5 million barrels a day, are under immediate threat. Karag Island, the oxygen line of Iranian oil exports, is suddenly turning from a profit channel into a choke point. And if exports stop while producing and production continues, the problem does not end with money. It reaches storage. Iran has limited storage capabilities. If the tanks fill up, it has to slow or stop wells. And in aging oil fields, a forced shutdown is not only a temporary loss, it can become permanent damage. Water enters the reservoir, pressure changes, and future production capacity is hurt. In other words, this American move does not only threaten today's income, it also threatens Iran's ability to recover tomorrow. But before we continue, this is exactly the moment to just ask for one important thing: to like, share, and subscribe. Because if you like this content, we need your help in reaching more people around the world with what's happening in Israel, here in this land. So, if you like what we're doing and want to receive more updates, better quality, just tell a friend, leave a comment, like, share, and subscribe. We're here to bring you the full picture. You can also look for us at our social media platforms to get the behind the scene look of what it's like to live in Israel, to report from Israel, especially now in this war. And now we return to the bigger picture, because while everyone is looking at Hormuz, there's another front that did not receive a timeout: Lebanon. In southern Lebanon, the IDF continues to press forward, and the battle in Binjbel is the clearest example. Division 98, with the paratroopers, Givati, and commando combat teams, completed the encirclement and launched a deep assault into the town. More than 100 Hezbollah terrorists were eliminated. Dozens of terror infrastructure were destroyed. And according to current assessments, fewer than 50 terrorists remain surrounded there. The important detail here is not only the numbers, it is the method of operation. The IDF describes slow but aggressive fighting, with isolation of the area, encirclement, rapid kill chain, and ground and air forces, and also tactical surprises. The terrorists hid in apartments, in basements, and inside civilian infrastructure. Small squads pulled launchers out of homes, fired at the forces, and quickly returned the launcher inside. This is the kind of fighting that requires not only force, but patience, fast identification, and precise work at distances of only a few dozen meters, and sometimes less than that. There's also a psychological dimension here. Binjbel is not just another village, it is a symbol. It is the place where Nasrallah once spoke about the spider web. Now, the IDF is not only attacking there, it is settling an account with a symbol. The field on which that myth was built no longer looks like a stage for victory. It looks like a zone of dismantling. And that matters because in the Middle East, symbols sometimes fall more slowly than terrorists. But when they fall, the effect runs deep. And at the same time, inside Lebanon itself, a complex picture is being emerged because Israel continues hitting Hezbollah. The Lebanese government is entering talks, and Shiite refugees from southern Lebanon are not always welcomed in other cities. That pressure pushes Hezbollah into an uncomfortable corner. On one side, it is being hit in the south. On the other, Iran is busy with itself. On a third side, diplomatic talks are moving above its head. This is not the end of Hezbollah, but it is certainly a moment in which the organization feels, perhaps for the first time, that it is no longer the one setting the pace by itself. And back to Iran, one of the more interesting points from recent days is that even during the fragile ceasefire of the Revolutionary Guards did not stop completely. According to a security official, they are not now producing new ballistic missiles on a serial industrial scale, but they are continuing to assemble missiles using components that are manufactured before this war. That's extremely important for understanding the situation, because even if production capability has been damaged, an ability to recover and also assemble still exists. And that means that the threat has not disappeared. It has simply shifted into a reduced, dispersed, and more patient model. The strikes already carried out are also continuing to produce effects. The satellite images released today of the Eagle 44 base in southern Iran sharpen the picture. This is a mountainous underground base around 160 kilometers north of the Strait of Hormuz, intended in the future to receive Su-35 fighter jets from Russia. According to the images, the hits near the tunnel entrances the taxiways, and the accesses to the runways have disabled the site's operational capabilities. Some aircrafts may have been buried inside the facility itself. So this was not just a symbolic strike on a remote base, but the paralysis of an air asset built especially for survivability. And that is interesting also because of its proximity to the Strait of Hormuz. If Iran planned to keep there a hardened, isolated base that could survive attack and support activity around the strait, it has now received proof that even what is buried in the mountain is not truly immune. And when you lose a port, a base, revenue, and time altogether, you begin to fight for the ability to breathe. The Americans, for their part, are not giving the impression of backing down. In recent days, tanker aircrafts, heavy transport aircrafts, forced reinforcements, and ongoing maritime and air preparations have all been observed. At the same time, Central Command has already acted to create the conditions for mine clearing in the strait. 2 American destroyers cross the area, and a safer, cheaper route is being built. In other words, the blockade is not just a declaration. It comes with operational infrastructure, intelligence, and a gradual buildup of freedom of action. From here, we also need to understand Trump's dilemma. He wants an achievement. He wants to show that he did not retreat from his basic demands towards Iran. He wants to present the reopening of Hormuz, the containment of the threat, and an Iranian climb down. But he also does not necessarily want another broad and costly war right now. That is why the blockade, from his perspective, is an aggressive middle move, strong enough to pressure, flexible enough to leave the door open for talks, and dramatic enough to signal to the whole regime that the Americans are not only talking. And the Iranians, on their side, they're trying to play for time, not to completely shut down the door to diplomacy, not to give up Hormuz without compensation, not to look as if they are surrendering. But there too, the clock is working against them. If they do not respond, they look weak. If they respond too hard, they may pull the Americans back into a military campaign that they are not sure that they can observe right now. And if they continue dragging things out, the economic pressure will only deepen. And inside all of this, there's also the China factor. China depends heavily on the Iranian oil and also on the flow from the Gulf. The Hormuz crisis hurts it directly. That means that it can be a player that pressures Iran to bend. On the other hand, it also benefits from a situation in which the United States is tied down in yet another expensive crisis. So Beijing right now does not look like a player stepping in to save the situation. It looks like a player carefully examining how to profit from it. If we summarize this day at the operational level, 3 lines of tension are running together. First, Hormuz and the blockade, meaning economic and maritime pressure. Second, preparation for renewed fire, including the possibility of Iranian or American strikes. The third, Lebanon, where the IDF continues building a new reality on the ground while diplomatic talks continue. And these 3 fronts are not separate. They feed one another. Pressure on Hormuz affects Tehran. What happens in Tehran affects Hezbollah. And what happens in southern Lebanon affects the decision space in Jerusalem and in Washington. And so, if there is one thing to take from day 45, it is that this war has shifted into a new phase. It is no longer only a war of missiles and airstrikes. It is a war over sea lanes, over economic oxygen lines, over symbols, over regime endurance, and over each side's ability to convince the other side that it will break first. Sometimes, the biggest battle does not begin with a barrage. Sometimes, it begins when one ship stops, one tanker turns around, and an entire regime understands that it no longer sets the price. And one more final point that must be said and kept in mind. Beneath all the major moves, all the analysis, and all the headlines, there is also a simpler question. Who stays calmer when the entire system enters pressure. The Iranian regime today looks far less stable than it is trying to project. But when a weak regime feels cornered, it can become more dangerous, not less. And that's exactly where the danger of the coming hours lies. Day 45 closes with a blockade about to begin. The IDF on high alert, Lebanon slowly burning, and Tehran understanding that the sea that was supposed to save it may become the rope tightening around its neck. The sharp question is not whether another round is on its way, but who will make the first mistake that ignites it all. And if you want a natural transition. So guys, more than understanding what's happening, which is important, but it's not the main point. The best thing that you can do is to pray. Seriously, pray for the situation. If you don't know how to pray, ask God to lead you. Just pray the Lord's Prayer. If you want some prayer points, let me help you out. 1, pray for wisdom to our leaders that are dealing with evil negotiators that know how to do this. They need all the help that they can get. That's 1. 2, pray for the IDF soldiers that are risking their lives. Pray for the US Naval Forces and Air Force and the boots on the ground, everybody who's in the Strait of Hormuz now trying to make order in all this mess. Pray for the children. Pray for real people that are suffering because of this. Remember, this is not just news, it's real people. And above all, pray for the peace of Jerusalem. And we'll see you again tomorrow.
Hello, this is Mati here in Jerusalem with TBN Israel.
This is Yair Pinto from TBN Israel here in Jerusalem. TBN Israel is keeping viewers informed with Israel-focused news, culture, and what God is doing in this land.
Support TBN Israel today online at tbn.org/Israel. Thank you.